maybe a part of me also feels like, we are allergic to wanting to concede counter-attacks because, I mean, I think
Yeah,
with how our team's set up, it's quite obvious that, this is what we do. I mean, you look at the pass maps afterwards, you go on like between the posts afterwards, you can see what our structure's like a lot of times, the average positions too with players in the field as well. I mean, we are literally one of the middest of block teams out there. And I mean, that's amazing for us. In cup games, of course, that's going to give you a massive advantage if we can nullify your position and limit their chances and create things in the transition against them. Of course, in a cup game where things like draws don't exist, that's going to really boost your chances a lot of getting a favourable result in the end. And I think maybe that explains why we get into many cup finals every single season, essentially. But I don't know, like, just like examining things even deeper as well too. I just feel like maybe sometimes the balance of the team is maybe too set towards minimizing the opposition and maybe
yeah.
towards protecting the midfield a lot more. I mean, I think Tuchel himself said it in a press conference. I was a bit surprised that when he did say that, it wasn't really caught up upon more online or on social media and stuff, where I think he really alluded to the fact that the reason why we kind of play like this too is because, we know with certain players in our team, and it's not an insult, it's, every player has their pros and cons, it's football, you know what I mean? You need to play maybe in a certain way to try and minimize that danger against him. And of course, I'm talking about Jorginho. I think, he's a great at what he does. I think he's one of the best in the world at playing on the ground. Amazing first time passes. The players are always constantly going on about how hard he is to press and close down, because when you get close to him, he's already moved the ball away. But I mean, in certain systems, maybe slow tempo possession style games, you want someone like that. But I don't know. I kind of feel too like when you have maybe attacking players that kind of contradict that style of football. It's not like like Man City, where you have like your little like low center of gravity tricksters who are all very comfortable, dribbling
Yeah.
out of spaces, tight spaces, can skip past a man or two, etc., etc. We don't have those guys. We have guys that really made their names in the transition, basically, playing in spaces. And I guess like if you're isolated in the final thirds, you're going to maybe be a lot more measured with your use of the ball. So you then don't have to, maybe potentially give a breakaway against the team.
It's an interesting point, because I think as you were talking now, I was actually picturing, if you think about the split in the team, so you've kind of got the back five and the two holding players, particularly when Jorginho is in there. The whole methodology was about controlled possession. It's about Jorginho recycling the ball, moving the ball. I think the term that I'm hearing people use is influencer in midfield. He influences sort of things left and right, short, changes the passing angles to other players. But then when you think about the strengths, or at least the systems that the attacking players came from, they want to receive the ball. And to be fair, look, Lukaku made a million runs last night. He made a million runs the other night, and nobody from midfield is going to find him with a pass, because that's not the kind of midfielders that we have. But when you think about Pulisic's strengths to me are running in behind, attacking the back post. He is a player who has great movement. Isn't a player that I would want coming short to receive the ball, coming deep. Playing back to goal. He's a player that I want to be like a Mohamed Salah, get in behind, and finish things. Timo Werner, again, exactly the same kind of player. Better when he's running onto things, better when he has space to run into, better when he can attack, 20, 30, 40 metres of space. Lukaku plays on the counter-attack at Inter, won the title, scored an absolute shed load of goals in a system that won the ball and moved the ball forward at incredible pace so that he could have that space to run into. Kai Havertz plays in Germany again, a little bit more technical maybe in terms of the quality, but still hasn't found his role and niche in the league, where there is far less space and it's a lot more compact.
And also, like, even touching on Kai Havertz as well too. After that first breakout season where he played like as that shadow striker and behind the striker, following season for that first half, the season before we signed him, he struggled in the first half of the season playing as a 10 because the spaces are really closed down. Of course, teams looking to snuff out one of Leverkusen's most dangerous players. And in the second half of the season, he played more on the right and a false nine where there was more spaces to play in. And that's when he came alive again. So he's always been a player for me personally that does do better when there is that space to run into. And I look at the entire team, other than Mason Mount, who, he still doesn't get enough credit, but the fact that he can play like every single role out there, and he's still the best one because he's probably the best at playing in those tight spaces. He has the upper body strength as well. He knows how to move the ball quickly, etc., etc. That's why he hasn't struggled under Tuchel. Yeah, everyone else has in the attack.
And that's the thing is what you're saying there is you could say, over 80% of our attackers want the game played at 100% faster than how Chelsea build up with a controlling midfield presence. And I include Cover in there as well. And also Kante to some extent, because Kante isn't going to hit, 50, 60 yard passes over the top, etc. all the time. So where you have a team that, probably the best pass with the ball in that back seven is Thiago Silva. He will play that ball long. But, when you're looking at the sort of the break in the team, you've got players that want to run onto the ball and play with the ball ahead of them. And you've got a team that is built around minimising transition and minimising space in midfield, because we've seen what this team looks like in space under Sarri. We've seen what they look like in space under Lampard. We concede 1 billion goals on the counter-attack because people can't defend spaces, which is absolutely, as you say, pros and cons of each player. That is an enormous con in the Premier League. If you want to play 4-3-3, you have to be able to defend in space. You have to be able to run, basically. So to minimise that, you've got 3 centre-halves behind, give you extra protection. You've got wing-backs who tuck in, will indent into the system, give you a bit more stability in central areas as well, ability to step in, make that an area compact. It's all about minimising space. But that's the same when you watch us build up play, the amount of times that we'll spend 10, 15, 20 passes shifting the ball around various points of the back three into the midfield, back out again, etc. By the time we eventually get the ball into the areas that are going to win the game, are going to affect the game, all of our attackers, their strengths are now completely minimised, because not a single one of them, as you say, bar maybe Mason Mount, Havertz on a good day, can really play in tight areas, can play in congested areas, have the creativity, have the passing range, the passing execution, the vision, have the ability to beat a player 1v1, to create a shot, to create a chance, etc. That's not their strengths are finishers. They are guys who run onto the ball. They are guys who want to be playing with the ball ahead of them. And that really, I think, is again talking about one of the inherent weaknesses of the system and how it plays in the league in particular. That sense of urgency. And I think teams now, you saw Brighton yesterday, teams who really, really know what they're doing when it comes to pressing and defensive structure. They must have pinched the ball off Jorginho in really bad areas about 4 or 5 times yesterday. Losing possession in really poor areas, and that was. That was a hallmark of Jorginho from a season ago, maybe 2 seasons ago. Not so much under the second half of the season under Tuchel, but certainly something that I would associate with him in previous systems. So when you're now starting to see teams are again targeting him, when he gets possession, he was a press trigger. As soon as he gets on the ball, somebody rush in, put him under pressure, see if you can force a mistake. We've seen him play some shocking passes back to the goalkeeper and in dangerous areas this season as well. So I think teams are starting to again get onto him in terms of possession. But if teams can successfully slow that build-up phase from us, which a lot of teams can do, and it's not particularly difficult to do. You have very, very mediocre teams who quite happily and successfully able to stop us from building up at pace. Doesn't happen all the time, doesn't mean that they get it right 100% of the time. But if they get it right the majority of the time, again, by the time we actually bypass the press, work the ball into midfield, for example, one of the 10s dropping deep to try and link play, we've already lost that 30, 40 metres of space that we probably needed to get Lukaku in, to get Werner in, to get Pulisic in, and all these other players. So it's not, when you're talking about balance, and I said when I was talking about systems and players not fitting the same style of play, your entire attack wants to go forward, your entire defence and midfield structure want to play the game in a very controlled, deliberate build-up manner. They want to control the game and progress the ball up the pitch very deliberately, not necessarily slowly on purpose, but it's deliberate, it's accurate, it has to be retained, that there's very little risk there, and that sort of real kind of massive difference between almost the philosophies in the team is why at times we look like, and I felt really like this against Brighton, like it was a team of trialists who had turned up and had never played a game of football with one another. The chemistry was so far apart, particularly the midfield and the attack. Huge, enormous, gaps and spaces, and no real kind of telepathy or feel for where players were going to be, where they were going to drop into, where they wanted the ball. And again, not picking on Ziyech and Lukaku, but that moment that caused a little argument before half time was a prime example of players who don't know where the other player wants to receive the possession, where he wants the ball, where Ziyech is likely to play it. And it happened, happened a couple of times. We've seen players passing the ball out of play. We've seen people, expecting the wing back to roll onto a pass, but really they wanted to receive it stationary. And all these sorts of little things for me are just indications that there are different ideologies, there are different ways that players understand the game and want to play the game and progress the ball. And it's not necessarily meshing at this point in time.
Yeah. You know, let's say I was a viewer and I wanted to understand, okay, I'm hearing what you guys are saying about Jorginho, for example, but if he really is this bad, of course, this is a guy that's been nominated, for Ballon d'Ors and nominated for European trophies, and, his role he played for Italy in the Euros. I mean, would you argue that maybe, I'm not would you argue that's the wrong way I'm phrasing this question, but with Jorginho, why do you think Tuchel really sees a lot of importance behind the player and really believes in him and uses him a lot?
I think Tuchel is a huge believer in defending with the ball, defending with possession. If your opponents don't have the ball, they can't score. And if you're looking to utilise your midfield and their skill set the best, then I certainly think Jorginho is very, very good at that. He's great at pivoting play. He's great at keeping possession. He's great at recycling the ball. And on his best days, and again, I get a lot of grief for not particularly rating him, but I've said on a number of podcasts, I thought in the Champions League last season that Kante and Jorginho partnership was absolutely excellent. I think Jorginho was great in the Champions League run, in that European style of football, where it's not as psychotically paced as the Premier League, and he doesn't have 400 Brighton players running at him as soon as he touches the ball. That for me was the perfect example of how successful he can be. Kante, obviously, I felt Kante was the best player in that Chelsea side who won the Champions League. I think Jorginho was a fantastic supporting act there and a great support player for him. Played very, very well. Didn't maybe have the greatest of finals, but perhaps didn't need to, because I think Kante again, Mason Mount were exceptional in that game. But I think as a player, if you want to defend with possession, if you want to place a high emphasis on retaining possession, retaining the ball, moving the ball, pivoting the ball, moving the ball left and right, looking for opportunities, being patient, then that's where he comes in. I think the problem we have, and again, this isn't necessarily a Jorginho issue, but some of the players that he is passing to, particularly the current wing backs, maybe some of the attacking players, our inability to retain possession by getting bundled off the ball, the ball's getting nicked or a toe poked out, for example, that then triggers that counter, and then Jorginho, that's where the problems start, because I think it was Lamptey last night. I mean, Jorginho tried to, I think he tried to slide tackle the centre half one where he missed by, it was like a FIFA slide tackle where you go about 15 seconds too early. Lamptey ran by him like he wasn't on the pitch. It's not his game, and again, that's something that always concerns me. I like my holding midfielder to be able to make those challenges, to be good in one-on-one tackles and situations, be able to cover space. That's why I always prefer someone athletic there. That's why I like Michael Essien as one of my favourites. Mikel and Makelele, guys who are really, really good at that role. But in terms of the positives that he brings, it's all about the possession style of football. The unfortunate thing is that there is a disconnect, I think personally, between the pace that we play at with Jorginho on the pitch, and I'm looking at the Liverpool game here with Kante and Kovacic, where I felt as a pair they were absolutely superb in that game. But you look at the pace that we played in that game with those two being able to move the ball, with being able to drive through midfield, being able to inject pace and dynamism on the ball, both passing and carrying it as well. That's the style of play that I think is more conducive to beating good teams and beating teams that we should be beating, is actually putting our better players in positions where we can actually use our 1v1 skills. Get Cover driving with the ball, get Kante driving with the ball through midfield. Give them, as you say, problems to think about, rather than wanting to receive the ball from the centre back, play it off at 90-degree angles, bounce it left right, maybe occasionally turn and play and try and play a pass forward. But sometimes pace and tempo matters, and people always talk about the tempo is not the same when he plays, etc. We're generally quite slow in build up when Jorginho plays, and that is by design. When he is out of position defensively, or when he doesn't have the legs to get back, but when he asks somebody to come out and do his defending for him, is one of the, I think for somebody who used to play as a DM, it's one of the worst things you could possibly do, is not be in the right position and then get a centre back to run out and try and make a tackle for you because you can't get back. But as I say, I think Champions League last season, European games, that style of football, and some big games as well, where the tempo is a little less. I generally think he's been, certainly was great in the Champions League run. But I always bring it back to the same point. Manchester City make a point of targeting him. I think other teams who have dynamic midfields will also target him. And there's a reason that he stopped playing in some of the bigger games under Tuchel. Didn't start versus City, didn't start versus Liverpool. Brentford, who have a very, very chaotic and energetic and aggressive midfield, didn't play against them. And I think against Brighton, possibly, obviously with hindsight, was maybe the wrong decision, because I think they swarmed him in the game, and he didn't really influence play in the way that he should. And just, I mean, the last point on him, Nini, for a guy that was voted, what was he, Europe's best footballer, whatever the award was, the random award, third in the Ballon d'Or, I think. Did he make the FIFA Pro team, etc.?
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah.
My number one thing for really top players and players that I perceive are really top, like Kante and Hazard and stuff like that. And you said something earlier, which is exactly spot on. Top players make everybody around them so much better. Mm-hmm. They don't need to have a system that absolutely caters to every single one of their strengths and puts other players in the team in bad positions because their weaknesses are quite glaring and are quite difficult to mask. Yeah. I don't necessarily always see, when I watch Jorginho play, I don't see him elevating others around him. I felt it was Kante in the Champions League run, and even Italy at the Euros. I don't think Jorginho won a Man of the Match award. No. And in the final against England, yes, he did get on the ball, but that was Marco Verratti. I thought Verratti was superb in that as well.
But I guess ultimately, I think the point we're really alluding to is the fact that if we want to move past this like horizontal way of playing, and if we want to move past this like defending with the ball instead of defending off the ball way of playing, then I guess you have to maybe phase out players like that to then introduce other players that can maybe suit and get the best out of not only the attack who need that type of verticality with how they play. They look for spaces, they want to roam inside to link up with people and then find another position to pick up instead of just being like in these like rudimentary, pretty static positions quite a lot of the time. To move away from that, you have to phase out Jorginho. Unfortunately, it's not no respect, we don't like him. It's just listen, we're a big club, yeah. And I make this point in my video on my match yesterday. Unfortunately, but we have Man City in this league, which means that they've raised the bar. And it means that if you want to win the league now, the points to win the league is much higher now than how it used to be. And on top of that, with the other teams in the Premier League now, new investment from owners, they all have internationals playing for them. They all play in very intelligent, unique ways themselves. It's a lot harder to win the Premier League now. So it means that every detail, to actually win the league, from being a third place club to a first place club, those details are exponential and they're even more dramatic and they're even more important. And the thing is, it's quite obvious that we need to have that balance where the whole squad can kind of suit towards a certain style of football. Yeah. And when you consider that maybe the younger guys really coming through now, it makes more sense for me to stick with them, knowing that, okay, we can now challenge if we make some smart acquisitions and balance the squad out properly for the next 5 to 7 years instead of for the next probably 1 year. This is probably the year. I don't think we'd get any new format from a lot of these guys for next season, to be honest. And it's just like, well, if we do that and have that mentality, we can be phased out by other teams. What if United to wake up one day, have a great window and boom? I mean, Arsenal, Vlahovic, they're looking to get back into things now. They've looked at us, introduce their own young players into the team as well. They're starting to enjoy life like Aubameyangs and other players like that, and they'll probably be better without them for that. And the complexion of the league, our competition can definitely change in the next few years. And we don't want to be behind reacting to what's happening. We want to assess what we have. We have young players. I'm looking at midfield too. Midfield for me is the key thing. One of the hardest positions to get right, and one of the key ones in terms of giving you the structural platform to be able to mount challenges and win. And when you have Mount, for me, this guy has to move as an 8 back into that midfield position. When you've got Conor Gallagher shown in the league already, one of the best young midfield players in the country. He knows how to score, knows how to get goals. He's another guy that, for me, is a Lampard regen in that sense. He can play that pass, he can play the pre-assist, he can get inside the box, he's a match winner. He's doing that at a very young age for Crystal Palace. And I think other players like Kai Havertz would ultimately benefit more, I think, from playing more as an attacking offensive 8. Now that he can press and work hard, which he wasn't doing at Leverkusen, that gives me more confidence that he can adapt and adjust to a role like that. And we see players do that all the time in the Premier League. You look at someone like Firmino moving from like a cam position to like the false nine role he plays. But to do that, we need to get that right DM. We've got Kante. We can as long as we keep Kante for 50% of the season with him playing the big games, and then he doesn't have to play every single game week in, week out when you've got Tchouameni behind him, for example. Then you've got a real team that's ready to challenge and put up a real battle against Man City, because I'm really stressing this. Man City aren't going away anywhere They aren't going away. They're going to be here. And if we want to win the league, it means that we have to be better than them, and we have to beat them. And to do that, what we're doing right now isn't the most effective way at being a team ready to do that. But before I let you continue on, Joe, I got one more super chat here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at it. And, I think, again, when you're talking about the evolution of the team, everyone has probably heard of the phrase, you need to speculate to accumulate. I think when it comes to certainly midfield play, that you have to, I think, certainly look for players who are comfortable or more confident playing in slightly bigger spaces than what we've seen. Yeah. You look at the gaps between our midfield, and certainly when you've got the wing backs tucking in and they're indented, it's a really, really compact system. We know the famous Guardiola meme by now about Chelsea compact, yada yada. It's not entirely untrue. That is the very big strength of the system, is that it really does minimise the space that players have to defend. However, if you have, let's say, a player capable of playing as a number 6 by himself, touchline to touchline, has the athletic quality, has all the technical tools to play there, the sort of cascading effect of that on the rest of the team is absolutely enormous. You have a player now who actually, do you know what, I can play 15 meters further ahead, or I can stay wider because I don't have to tuck in, I don't need to come back, or I've got more confidence in this player being able to win a ball in transition. And it's about finding the right medium between the risk and reward. At the moment, we're very low risk, kind of low reward in terms of what we kind of produce during games. Low individual XG. We don't tend to produce incredibly high quality number of quality individual shots. I don't seem to really dominate games. And I say dominate, I mean City just strangle teams in the final third, but we don't have that quality to just relentlessly keep the ball and keep them under pressure and keep them on the back foot. And a lot of what they do comes from their faith and confidence in knowing that actually we can leave the DM where he is, or we can leave, we can play with people, 5 attackers really, really high at the pitch, because we know in transition, we've got the centre backs, we've got the holding player there to do the covering work. And I think when it looked to sort of the way that this Chelsea side will evolve in the future under Tuchel, it has to be about accepting a little bit more risk and a little bit more reward, kind of reward into the style of play. And by getting a holding player in there that, as you say, can not necessarily be a number 6 and just play in a 4-3-3, but even having somebody in that double 6, that pivot at the moment, that really can play touchline to touchline, that really does allow us to be more aggressive in our positioning. It opens up the pitch, and ultimately what Chelsea need to do, in a way of beating low blocks and a way of beating teams who want to play more defensive against us. You can either stretch the pitch vertically, which obviously if a team's playing a low block, sitting on the edge area, you can't stretch a team vertically because there's no space in behind. So you want to try and stretch them as horizontally as possible. So by being, having somebody that you're confident can play in space, doesn't need to have 2-3 players within 10 metres of him. Your wing backs can literally stick on the touchline. Your number 10s can go wide. They can go in 15, 20 metres up the pitch, because they may have a guy who can punch the ball into them. And all of a sudden now you've got a team that is defending against, Chilwell and Reece James potentially in the future, who are, chalk on the boots, standing on the touchline, making that pitch as wide as possible. You've got number 10s now who are confident of making a run beyond the striker, because they know if they lose the ball, it's not up to them to run back 80 metres to try and win a tackle, because your 2 central midfielders aren't very good defensively or can't cover the ground. So it's like a mental change in players around them, that they feel more free to be more attacking, to take up more aggressive positioning, which in turn obviously impacts how people are defending against them. Teams can't defend the width of the penalty area anymore. They have to go slightly wider. It's all about creating space. If you can't create space vertically, you need to try and create it horizontally across the pitch. And the only reason you can, or the only way, one of the better ways of doing that is having players that are more comfortable playing in wider spaces, because then that way you can actually stretch the pitch and kind of create bigger pockets of space for players. Wouldn't it be great if every time Mount or Havertz, let's say they were playing in those 10 roles, received the ball and didn't have somebody within 3 metres of them to try and kick them up in the air or tackle them. Instead, actually, the centre back is more concerned that actually, Reece James is right on the touchline, or has made an amazing run because he knows that the switch is coming, or knows that the ball is going to come his way. So he's now more concerned about what's outside him than just all eyes on Mason Mount or all eyes on Havertz or whoever is playing there. It mentally affects the opposition. It affects how people defend against us, and this all literally comes by having a guy or people in that midfield who are comfortable playing in space and are happy to play in space, happy to be a bit more risky in terms of their aggressiveness in possession. That includes passing, dribbling, whatever it might be, and it stretches teams, and that is ultimately one way that we're going to achieve a lot more of a fluidity in attack by creating more space.
And
at the moment,
you're so right what you're saying, man. Like, just even touch upon that, a lot of games that we struggle. I mean, it explains even more now why teams will look to sit back with the very low blocks, keep themselves immovable in the middle, because they know that once we can't stretch teams horizontally like that, then that's it. With us playing ball to feet or playing in front of defenses is very slow, and there's opportunities there to find the right times to win that ball back, start a counter attack, and attack the spaces in behind the wing backs. Now that we don't even have your Jameses or Chilwells anymore now. I mean, but even more susceptible to it at times. So